Hey guys, it's Kemi and my review for Drive Away Dolls. And this film, it takes place in the late 1990s. We are centering on two characters here. We have Jamie, who is this very free-spirited, very energetic, sexually active woman who is, in this relationship with another girl, and then ends up cheating on her, and, she ends up breaking up with her and things like that. And then you also have the character of Marianne, who is her best friend. Well, Marianne is planning to travel to Tallahassee to go visit her grandmother, and Jamie, in search of a fresh start to kind of get over this breakup, decides to tag along. They go on this road trip, kind of in a way to kind of discover themselves and things like that. But while doing so, they start to realize that the what was meant to be this really fun, lighthearted trip actually is a lot more dangerous than they thought it was going to be, as eventually they find this briefcase, and that case happens to be a very hot commodity for a bunch of criminals who are in pursuit of it. So both of these women have to do what they can to try to fend them off, but also try to still enjoy their trip. And I was very excited for this film, not just because of the fact that this is the first film from Ethan Coen that we've had in a while, but also the fact that we had this very, stacked cast here. It seemed like a very fun and just quirky comedy that was kind of going to get back to the earlier days of the Coen brothers. Now, obviously, the Coen brothers aren't working together here. This is just Ethan Coen also teaming with his wife in this movie, Tricia Cooke, who is basically like a unspoken, co-director. It hasn't specifically said it, but she basically is a co-director to this movie. So I was really excited to see what they were going to do together. This movie was originally supposed to come out in September last year, and then it got delayed pretty much because of the writers and actor strike and things like that. And when it did, I was kind of sad because I was really excited to see this one, and, it got pushed to February, and, I'll be honest, 2024 has been kind of rough in terms of new releases so far. There's been some gems here and there, but overall, it really has not been that strong of a start, and I was hoping that Drive Away Dolls could be one of those few that really ends up standing out, really ends up being something fun and memorable, and overall, yeah, that's what this movie was. I did have a very fun time with Drive Away Dolls. It is admittedly not quite as good as I wanted to be, but for a really fun, off-the-walls road trip film, this was definitely did get its job done in terms of what I wanted to be. But we're just getting into it right now. The first thing to talk about, I think, in terms of what makes this film work as good as it is the cast here. And the cast, this is such a stacked group of actors here. So many amazing and talented actors, not just for comedy, but just in general. And I was really excited to see how they were going to lend their talents to a film like this. And I think everyone really does do a very good job here. But easily the best part of this movie, it has to be the combined effort of Margaret Qualley and Geraldine Viswanathan. Margaret Qualley, in particular, is playing such a different role than we've seen from her before. Jamie is so incredibly outspoken. She is, like I said, this very free-spirited type persona who really doesn't give a fuck what you think about her, and she does it so incredibly well. She transforms in this character really well. You really do find yourself latching onto her and finding her to be such a dynamic and fun presence throughout the movie. But Geraldine Viswanathan really provides the heart of this film. She is probably in a film with a lot of just really ridiculous characters. She really is kind of like the most grounded out of all of them, and I think that she did a really good job with that. Marianne is definitely the character that has the biggest arc out of everyone. She starts off the film, she's very innocent, she's very, insecure and things like that, and she's really kind of trying to find her footing within the world overall, and she, through this journey, she really discovers a lot about herself, and I found her character to just be really great throughout this film. I thought that she just gave a really strong performance. I really just enjoyed, again, the dichotomy between these two. I think that's why they work so well together, with someone like Jamie, who, like I said, is just so off the walls and crazy, someone like Marianne, who is so much more straight-laced in that way. I just thought they balanced each other really well, and I really did enjoy their chemistry throughout this film. And it's one of those instances where, like, if their chemistry is not as rock solid as it is, and if you don't buy into as much, the movie just kind of crumbles, and gratefully, they are really the thing that holds this film together. One of the biggest reasons this film is as successful as it is because of their incredible comedic talents here. Everyone else here does do a really solid job overall. I don't think there's a single bad performance in the bunch, but I do want to highlight Beanie Feldstein, who plays the character of Suki. She is Jamie's ex in this film, and she is so much fun to watch in this movie. Suki is the kind of character who has this axe to grind throughout the movie. You can see just how enraged she is at things that are going on, and there's one freak out from her, especially early on in the film, and it's probably the hardest I laughed in the entire movie. I just thought she was so much fun here. It's a very different kind of role than Feldstein has played before, but she really just relished every second of it, and I really enjoyed her in this film. And the only other two standouts I do want to mention here are Joey Slotnick and CJ Wilson. These are the main sort of criminals that we're following throughout this movie. They are in pursuit of our main two characters, and they are a lot of fun in this film. Both of them are pretty much incompetent at what they do, but but one of them is clearly better at the job than the other, and I just thought their back and forth was a lot of fun. It was a nice contrast to what we were getting with our main two characters, and anytime we cut to them, I thought also the film ended up being very successful. So overall, I thought this entire cast worked really well together. Alright, so with that said, let's get to the directing and the writing, which Ethan Coen's directing in this movie I think is very interesting to note here. The movie is every bit as fun as you want it to be. The movie is very off the walls. It's really crazy in that way, and I think Coen does a really good job with that, but I think Tricia Cooke is really the person you need to credit in terms of the directing of this movie, because while I think Coen does a great job in bringing that, like I said, just sort of offbeat sort of feel to this film, I think Cooke is the reason the movie has the style that it does, because a big thing to note about this movie is that, you know, Cooke herself has said this film is loosely based on her experience in the 90s as someone who is, you know, openly gay and things like that. She herself went through a very similar experience, and I think she really provides the heart and soul of this film. She's giving it a feel of its own, and you know, I really am looking forward to seeing more collabs between these two in the future. I heard that this is like the start of a potential trilogy of sorts, and I am very much down for it. I don't know if it's going to continue after this movie, because unfortunately it wasn't successful at all in theaters, but I'm hoping that we're at least able to see more from these two, because I think both of them just work really well together. Cooke gives this film such a different kind of feel. The movie, yes, is very funny, but it also, at points, is so wild and just crazy. It feels almost like a B-movie by the end of it, and I think Cooke's directing is a big reason for that. She does everything she can to make this film every bit as just zany and ridiculous as it can possibly be, but also provides this genuine sense of heart, and I think it works really well. I really enjoyed the directing. You could tell there was a lot of passion that was poured into this, and I really just enjoyed their dynamic in this film. I thought their directing was very well done here. Let's get to the screenplay in this movie, because this is the one area that I do have quite a bit to say about. The film itself is relatively simplistic, at least it starts out that way. You really just have these two characters, and, you know, very quickly they end up going on this road trip, but I think the movie does enough with them to fully establish who they are and really get you to latch onto both of them. Like I said, Jamie is the type of character who really is just so unbothered by everything. She doesn't really care about the fact that she has betrayed her girlfriend and things like that, or at least it doesn't seem that way, and that's what makes her work as a character, whereas Marianne is the pretty much the opposite of that. She is much more straight-laced. She's much more serious in that way. She is someone who is at this job that she doesn't really enjoy. She's constantly being, you know, she is constantly being, she's constantly being scrutinized and ridiculed by these misogynists that she's dealing with, and you can really see that this just is not a happy environment for her, and you really get a chance to see how this road trip is getting her to let loose a little bit. Jamie gets her to kind of, recognize things within her life and recognize things about herself, and I really did find that journey to be an interesting one. I think in the midst of all this, like, criminal stuff you have going on, there is a really good personal story, especially for her character, and I really enjoyed the journey that she ends up going down in this film. She starts off the film in one way and ends the film in a completely different way, and I really did enjoy her arc in this movie, and how these two really do end up bringing the best out of each other. I really did like the direction that it went, albeit it does go in a predictable direction. Like, I think if you were to ask me where, like, if I was to ask you where this movie would go, you would probably be right in terms of what they end up doing with it, but I still really did enjoy the personal journey of especially her character. And then Jamie as a character, there isn't a lot for her in terms of like a specific journey. There's some things that are hinted at, but it's not quite as in-depth, but I still really did enjoy her character and where she ends up going. So overall, like I said, I think both characters are rock solid here, and I think that does end up working out very well. And I think that's enough a reason to really enjoy this movie. When the movie is just this fun sort of buddy comedy, I think it really is at its best. However, that's not all this movie is trying to be. Like I said, it's also trying to be this incredibly sort of cat and mouse type, crime film. It's in that way. It's trying to be, it's trying to involve all these other criminals that are in pursuit of this case, and you're not really sure what exactly is going down. And I will say, the way the two plot lines intersect at first can be a little bit rocky, and that's the one thing that does hold this movie back, is that for a while you're just wondering how it's all going to fit together. There's an opening scene you see in the trailer, it involves Pedro Pascal's character, and from that point on, we don't really get much more of the criminal side of things. It really isn't until these two venture out on their road trip that we start to see more of that fleshed out. And the way it eventually all comes together does work really well. The movie has this really interesting sense of humor that I wasn't expecting. It starts off and it seems just like a typical comedy, but it gets more offbeat as it goes on, to the point of absurdity. I mean, by the end of this movie, like I said, it practically is a B movie. It's not taking itself seriously at all, and I think the movie is honestly that much better for it. I like the fact that this film knows what it is, and it isn't really trying to be anything that different. There are moments of heart, but as the movie goes on, like I said, it becomes a lot more ridiculous, and the directions it goes in were truly just like absolutely wild. I was not expecting them to take the direction that they did. Let's just say what's in that case is, it's not what you're expecting. That's all I can really say. Like, I'm not gonna get more into it, but wow, I was not expecting them to go to the place that they did, but I was surprised by how well it really did end up working. The story that they were trying to tell in this movie, it ends up being a lot sillier than you expect it to, but yet it works because the film really does commit to it. It isn't like this is silly but nothing else is. The movie really does connect to, like I said, this very sort of zany tone. Hell, there are transitions in this movie that have like cartoon noises and things like that. There are moments in this film where, you have these characters in these ridiculous situations or acting just completely off the rails. Like I said, Beanie Feldstein's character, there's a scene with her especially that is just insane, the way it goes down. And the movie, again, just keeps escalating in terms of its in terms of its irreverence in that way, and I think it works for sure. I don't think that this is one of those instances where the movie is has this lunacy to it, but it feels like it sticks out like a sore thumb. No, it really does feel like it fits into this movie, and that's something I did really enjoy about the screenplay here. So the other thing I really appreciate about the screenplay for this movie is that, as you saw in the trailer, trailer. There's some other sort of weird stuff that's going on here. You know, we saw like a scene of like Miley Cyrus in the trailer and things like that, and they keep having this motif of going back to her, and it's in this different sort of style and things like that, and I was like, I don't really know how this is going to connect. And then when you realize what that was supposed to be, I found that to be so incredibly clever, the way they tied that into the movie. I thought that worked really well. There is this constant flashback to one of the two girls. I'm not going to say what's going on exactly, but you're kind of wondering what that's all about. And I thought that also tied in really well. I thought they did a good job with that towards the end of this movie. So there were things where I was like, I don't really know how this fits, but yet they found a way to, blend it all together. And I thought it actually turned out quite successfully. Photography in this movie, I think, is really well done. The movie has a very fun sort of look and feel to it, but it also is experimenting with different styles here. I'm sure you saw from the trailer, there are moments in this movie that look like a vintage film from the 70s, and I didn't really know how it was all going to connect, but they really do find a way to blend it in seamlessly in a way that I wasn't expecting them to, and I thought it was actually really cool the way this film kind of experimented with those ideas. In many ways, the movie has the feel of sort of this experimental film, and I think that's something that Cooke was trying to do. Cooke flirts, and again, I think a lot of that is due to Tricia Cooke. I think she's flirting with a lot of different sort of styles and aesthetics here, and I think it really does end up working really well. I really enjoyed the cinematography and the overall feel of this film. The score also is a lot of fun here. It just heightens the like vibrancy and the overall just energetic feel that this film has, and I thought overall the score was just a lot of fun here. When it comes to the editing, yes, this movie is very short, and I actually do think that is one of the things that holds this film back. I understand. I don't have a problem with the movie being too short. In fact, I like the fact that, this film is kind of just like very much like you're in and you're out. Like, it doesn't really try to, drag on at any point. But I do think at least the first, 20 to 30 minutes could have been fleshed out a bit more. It feels like we kind of rush towards this road trip, and the film is in such a hurry to get to that point, and it doesn't feel like we get enough time to really spend with these characters. Marion, I think we do, but Jamie, I think we could have fleshed out a little bit more, and I think that does hold the film back. Also, the third act of this film especially is incredibly rushed. There is a revelation that happens involving what's in the case, and pretty much from there, the film is just on this constant accelerated speed. It just feels like this film is in such a hurry to get to the end, and it just feels like there was a little bit more we needed to fully suck us in. There's some elements that end up coming into this film that I really just wanted to see more of, and I think that the editing does hold it back. However, that really leads me to my biggest issue with this film, in that though I really do appreciate the characters of Jamie and Marianne, and I really enjoy the journeys that both of these characters go down, the rest of the characters that populate this movie, I really can't tell you all that much about. I think what was so disappointing to me about this movie is that we have some generally A-list actors here. Colman, Domingo, Bill Camp, Matt Damon, Pedro Pascal, and what they're reduced to is basically just a very quick series of vignettes that don't really feel like they coalesce into something more. We know that these characters are on this journey. We know they're trying to retrieve this case, but we don't really understand how they were appointed to this, why this really matters to them. We eventually do get an explanation, but it feels more like a rushed exposition of sorts than it really feels like we get a sense of why these characters are here and what is important to them. They're really just supposed to be inept criminals that each one is kind of worse than the last, and that does work in the sense of comedy, especially, like I said, Joey Slotnick and CJ Wilson's characters. I thought those two were a lot of fun as we see them constantly get into these situations where you can see they very obviously are going down the wrong path, and it's super obvious what they're doing wrong, but yet they themselves are just so bad at what they're doing they can't seem to recognize that, and I think that works. But the other characters in this movie, I just felt like we didn't really get enough from, and I really wanted to see more from them. And I understand, obviously, we don't want to take away from Jamie and Marianne, but I think just at least 10 to 15 more minutes with these guys, it could have made the film that much more exciting, I could have been that much more sucked into, because for a while, if I'm being honest, that part of the movie feels kind of disconnected from the rest of the film. It feels like there should be more going on, and you don't ever really feel the urgency of this mission. You don't really feel like, you can't really tell what's at stake for these two women and why this is such an issue and why these criminals are just in such hot pursuit of the case until, like I said, really the last like 20 minutes of this movie. But by the time we get there, well, yes, it's a really funny explanation, and it does give us a sort of motivation for these characters. It still feels pretty surface level. It feels like this part of the film, there just wasn't as much attention paid to it, and I feel like just as much effort should have been put into there, because you have these actors and they're really good at what they do, but it just doesn't feel like they're given enough here. And by the end of the movie, I did feel slightly underwhelmed by that, and I think that definitely could have helped the film just boost it a little bit more from really good to something generally great, and I think that's the one thing that does hold it back. This also applies to Beanie Feldstein's character, who in the beginning of the movie seems like she's going to be a pretty prominent character. We're kind of going along with her on this mission where she's trying to go after these criminals and things like that. But there's a point in this film where she just kind of disappears, and it doesn't feel like we get enough of her, and I was really into her character. I liked what they were doing with her, and I just felt like they could have dived a little bit deeper into her character as well, because the film kind of leads you to believe, you would think from the trailers, that like she's kind of the third lead of this movie, and I would say overall she is, but it just didn't feel like there was enough with her. There was a point in the film where she eventually does end up coming together with all the other characters, and it just felt kind of abrupt. I'm like, oh, we're really at this point already? It didn't feel like we were any closer like a second ago. So it just felt like that character, again, they just didn't put as much emphasis into, and I really wanted to see more with her overall. But overall, I had a really fun time with this movie. The two main actors work really well together. They have a really strong chemistry throughout. It's got some really great directing from Ethan Coen, who does what he does best, but also have this really sort of personal and experimental feel from Tricia Cooke. I'm really excited to see what these two end up doing together next, because I think they actually do work really well together. It's got a pretty hysterical screenplay throughout, with two characters that you do overall feel pretty latched onto. And while at points it can feel a bit detached and you're not entirely sure what it's going to lead to, what it eventually does lead to was incredibly shocking and went in such a off the walls and just really silly and really just absurd direction that I really just couldn't help but enjoy what the movie was trying to do. I think this is definitely going to be a film that not everybody loves, but honestly, I did find myself pretty entertained throughout. I had a pretty big smile on my face throughout watching it. I really enjoyed watching all these actors at the top of their game. While not all of them are utilized that well, I think what this film overall was trying to accomplish, it did do very well. If you want just a really fun, zany time at the movies, I think this is a good film to do that with. And in a year where so far is filled with just a lot of uninspired blockbusters and recycled ideas, it's really nice to see a movie that is trying to do something distinctly different, is trying to be something really weird and out there, and I think it really does end up succeeding at that. So overall, I had a really good time with Drive Away Dolls, and I am going to give it a B. Over, guys, to my review of Drive Away Dolls. Let me know if you guys saw this movie at all, left your thoughts on it. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.